For years, the residents of Evergreen Apartments had been plagued by strange occurrences. The building, a once grand structure now faded with time, sat on the edge of town, surrounded by tall, imposing trees that seemed to guard it from prying eyes. Its halls echoed with the memories of better days, but now a sense of unease permeated the air. It started with little things. Missed items like keys and wallets would reappear in odd places. Furniture seemed to shift positions overnight. The elevator would stop at random floors, doors opening to empty hallways. These oddities were unsettling, but no one thought too much of them. Life went on, and people adjusted to the quirks of their aging home. Then, the disturbances grew more menacing. Noises in the night, a scraping sound, like nails on a chalkboard, emanated from the basement. Soft, almost human moans floated up through the vents. The power would flicker, plunging the building into darkness for agonizing minutes at a time. Pets went missing, and strange claw marks appeared on the walls. The residents shared their stories with each other, huddled in the laundry room or the dimly lit lobby. Mrs. Gonzalez, the kind-hearted elderly woman from the third floor, was particularly vocal. She had lived in the building the longest and claimed to have heard something moving around at night. The younger residents laughed it off, attributing it to her age and overactive imagination. But then, Mrs. Gonzalez disappeared. Her absence was noticed immediately. She was the heart of the building, always ready with a warm smile and a plate of freshly baked cookies. When she didn't answer her door one morning, her neighbor Emily grew concerned. She alerted Jack, a young journalist who lived on the second floor and had always been skeptical of the supernatural. Jack and Emily entered Mrs. Gonzalez's apartment, their hearts pounding. The place was in disarray, furniture overturned, books scattered, a broken vase on the floor. Her beloved cat, Whiskers, was hiding under the bed, hissing and terrified. It was clear something terrible had happened. Panicked, Emily ran to Mr. Thompson's office. Mr. Thompson, the building's owner and manager, was a gruff, no-nonsense man in his 60s. He dismissed their concerns, insisting that Mrs. Gonzalez must have wandered off or had an accident. But Jack and Emily were not convinced. They knew Mrs. Gonzalez would never leave Whiskers behind. That night, the residents held a meeting in the lobby. Fear and frustration were palpable. They shared their experiences, and a pattern emerged. All the disturbances seemed to originate from the basement. Few had ever ventured down there. It was locked and labeled storage. The door was old and rusted, the kind that creaked ominously when opened. Jack, determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, proposed they confront Mr. Thompson and demand access to the basement. Sarah, a brave schoolteacher who had moved in recently, and Tom, a retired cop with a sharp eye and steady nerves, volunteered to join him. The three of them approached Mr. Thompson's office with a mix of determination and dread. Mr. Thompson's office was cluttered with paperwork and old furniture, a testament to the building's long history. He looked up from his desk, irritated. "What now?" he grumbled. Jack took a deep breath. "Mr. Thompson, we need to see the basement. There's something down there, and it's putting us all in danger." Mr. Thompson's face paled. He fidgeted with a pen, avoiding their eyes. "There's nothing down there but old junk. You're letting your imaginations run wild." "Then why not let us check it out?" Sarah countered. "If there's nothing there, we'll leave it alone. But Mrs. Gonzalez is missing, and we need to find her." Tom stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "With all due respect, sir, We're not asking. We're telling. We need to see the basement. Reluctantly, Mr. Thompson reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a set of keys. His hand shook slightly as he handed them over. Fine, but I warned you there's nothing down there. With the keys in hand, Jack, Sarah, Tom, and a few other residents headed to the basement door. The air grew colder as they descended the stairs, a musty smell of dampness and decay growing stronger. The flickering lights cast eerie shadows on the walls, and the tension was thick. Jack inserted the key into the lock, and the door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit space filled with old furniture, dusty boxes, and cobwebs. It looked like any other basement, but the uneasy feeling in their stomachs told them otherwise. As they moved further in, they noticed a heavy rusted door partially concealed behind a stack of boxes. It was different from the rest, more imposing and sinister. Tom, using his strength, managed to pry it open, revealing a dark corridor leading further underground. The air grew colder, and a sense of foreboding enveloped them. With flashlights in hand, they ventured into the unknown, their fears growing with each step. They had no idea what awaited them, but they knew they had to find out, for Mrs. Gonzalez and for their own safety. The narrow corridor beyond the rusted door was a stark contrast to the cluttered basement. The walls, previously rough concrete, transitioned to a cold, smooth metallic finish. An ominous hum seemed to reverberate through the air, as if the very walls were alive. Jack led the way, his flashlight beam slicing through the darkness. Sarah and Tom followed closely, their senses on high alert. Their footsteps echoed eerily, amplifying the silence around them. The air was damp and musty, tinged with the metallic scent of old machinery. They passed several doors, all locked and sealed tight, with labels such as lab equipment and chemical storage. Each step deeper into the underground labyrinth heightened their anxiety. As they rounded a corner, the corridor opened into a vast room. The ceiling was high, and the walls were lined with shelves full of ancient scientific equipment, long abandoned and covered in a thick layer of dust. At the center of the room stood a large, reinforced glass chamber, illuminated by a faint, eerie green glow from within. The group halted in their tracks, their eyes fixed on the grotesque figure inside. The creature was humanoid but twisted and malformed. Its skin was pallid and stretched tight over a skeletal frame, with grotesquely elongated limbs that ended in sharp claw-like fingers. Its face, once human, was now a mask of agony and rage, with eyes that glowed an unnatural shade of yellow. Despite its monstrous appearance, there was a lingering trace of humanity in its features, a haunting reminder that this creature had once been a person. Jack approached a nearby table cluttered with dusty papers and old journals. He picked up the topmost journal, its cover brittle and cracked. The name Dr. Victor Leclerc was inscribed on the first page, and the entries were dated from over a decade ago. As Jack skimmed through the entries, he began to piece together a chilling story. Dr. Leclerc had been a brilliant but controversial scientist, obsessed with the idea of enhancing human capabilities. His research had been funded by a private organization with deep pockets and darker intentions. The lab beneath Evergreen Apartments had been his secret workspace, hidden from the prying eyes of the outside world. According to the journal, Dr. Leclerc had been conducting experiments on willing subjects, promising them improved strength, intelligence, and longevity. But as the experiments progressed, things began to go horribly wrong. The serum he developed had unpredictable and often horrifying side effects. The final entry revealed the identity of his last subject, a young man named Lucas, who had been one of the building's maintenance workers. Jack read aloud, his voice trembling. Lucas was a promising subject, strong and healthy. The initial results were promising, but soon his body began to reject the serum. His transformation was rapid and catastrophic. I have tried everything to reverse the effects, but nothing works. He is now more beast than man, driven by an insatiable rage. I have no choice but to contain him here, in the hopes that I can find a cure before it's too late. Sarah's eyes widened in horror. Lucas. He must have been trapped down here for years. No wonder we've been hearing those sounds. He's been trying to get out. Just as the gravity of their discovery sank in, a low, guttural growl emanated from the chamber. The creature, Lucas, was waking up. Its eyes snapped open, locking onto the intruders. The reinforced glass began to crack under the pressure of its thrashing, the sound piercing the tense silence. "Everyone, back away slowly," Tom instructed, his voice calm but firm. "We need to figure out a way to contain it before it breaks free." The group scrambled to find something to reinforce the chamber, but the room offered little in terms of useful materials. Tom's eyes scanned the area, landing on a control panel near the far wall. He rushed over, hoping to find a way to activate any remaining containment protocols. With Sarah's help, Tom managed to power up the control panel. The old machinery whirred to life, the lights flickering as the system struggled to operate. Tom's fingers flew over the buttons, trying to decipher the outdated interface. Finally, he found what he was looking for: a secondary containment system designed to reinforce the primary chamber. Heavy metal bars descended from the ceiling, locking into place around the glass chamber. Lucas roared in frustration, the sound reverberating through the room and sending chills down their spines. The reinforced bars held, but it was clear they wouldn't last long against the creature's relentless assault. Jack turned back to the journals, flipping through the pages in a desperate search for answers. There has to be something here. Something about an antidote or a way to reverse the transformation. Sarah joined him, scanning the handwritten notes and diagrams. "Look here," she said, pointing to a page detailing the serum's composition. Dr. Leclerc was working on an antidote. He believed it was possible to reverse the effects, but he didn't have enough time to complete it. "Then we need to finish what he started," Jack replied, determination in his eyes. "We need to find the ingredients and create the antidote. It's our only chance." Tom glanced at the thrashing creature, the reinforced bars already beginning to buckle. "We don't have much time. We need to move fast." With a renewed sense of urgency, the group split up to search the lab for the necessary components. The clock was ticking, and the fate of everyone in Evergreen Apartments hinged on their success. The basement lab was a maze of forgotten science and abandoned hope. Jack, Sarah, Tom, and the other residents scattered in different directions, their flashlights casting eerie shadows on the walls. Dust particles danced in the beams, adding to the surreal atmosphere. The growls and roars from Lucas, the creature once human, echoed through the cavernous space, spurring them into frantic action. Jack and Sarah focused on the journals and scattered papers, hoping to find more detailed notes on the antidote. Tom, drawing on his cop instincts, took charge of organizing the search, directing the residents to look for specific chemicals and equipment. The tension was palpable. They all knew time was running out. Jack found a stack of notes with detailed chemical formulas. "Here," he called out to Sarah, who was rifling through a drawer of old syringes and vials. "This looks like Dr. Leclerc's work on the antidote. We need to find these compounds." Sarah scanned the list, her background in teaching giving her a methodical approach to problem solving. "Okay, we need to find sodium thiopental, calcium chloride, and several others. Let's split up and see if we can locate them." Tom assigned residents to different areas of the lab. Emily and Marcus, a young couple from the 4th floor, were tasked with searching the chemical storage room. Mr. Thompson, now visibly shaken but determined to help, was sent to check the refrigeration units for any preserved samples. As they searched, the lab seemed to come alive with memories of its dark past. Broken beakers and cracked test tubes littered the counters, and faded photographs of test subjects were pinned to bulletin boards. The faces in the photos were hauntingly human, a stark contrast to the monstrous form of Lucas thrashing in the reinforced chamber. Emily and Marcus found the chemical storage room locked, but with Tom's assistance, they managed to force the door open. Inside, shelves lined with dusty bottles and containers stretched out before them. Emily scanned the labels, calling out the names of the compounds they needed. Marcus grabbed each one and placed them in a metal tray. "We've got sodium thiopental and calcium chloride," Emily shouted back to Tom. "We're still looking for the others." Mr. Thompson, rummaging through the refrigeration units, found several vials labeled with the familiar handwriting of Dr. Leclerc. He carefully carried them back to the central table where Jack and Sarah were working. "These look like they might be what you're looking for," he said, placing the vials down gently. Jack and Sarah examined the vials, comparing them to the notes. "Yes, these are it," Sarah confirmed. "But we're still missing a few key ingredients." Tom's voice boomed across the lab. "Everyone, focus on finding these last few chemicals. We need to hurry." As they continued their desperate search, Lucas's growls grew louder, more ferocious. The reinforced bars were beginning to bend under the creature's relentless assault. The residents could feel the floor tremble with each impact, and fear gripped their hearts. Finally, with a triumphant shout, Emily found the remaining chemicals. She and Marcus rushed them over to Jack and Sarah, who immediately set to work. Using an old but functional Bunsen burner and a set of scales, they began to mix the ingredients, following Dr. Leclerc's notes meticulously. The process was delicate and precise. Each drop of liquid and pinch of powder had to be measured perfectly. The room fell into a tense silence, the only sounds being the bubbling of chemicals and the distant roars of Lucas. The residents watched anxiously, knowing that their lives depended on the success of this antidote. Minutes felt like hours as Jack and Sarah worked, their hands steady, but their hearts racing. Sweat trickled down their brows as they carefully combined the final components. At last, they produced a syringe filled with a clear, shimmering liquid, the antidote. Sarah nodded, her mind racing. "We can use the old lab equipment to create a diversion, something loud and flashy to draw its attention." The residents sprang into action, setting up a makeshift distraction using an old generator and some flammable chemicals. As the plan came together, Tom prepared the syringe, his grip firm and resolute.
They all knew this was a one-shot deal. Failure was not an option. With everything in place, Tom signaled for the distraction to be activated. The generator roared to life, sparking and emitting a blinding light. Lucas, enraged by the noise and light, turned its attention away from the group. Taking advantage of the moment, Tom moved swiftly and decisively. He approached the creature with the syringe ready, dodging its flailing limbs. The reinforced bars provided some protection, but he knew he had to be quick. With a well-timed lunge, Tom jabbed the needle into Lucas's arm and injected the antidote. The creature roared in pain and fury, its body convulsing violently. Tom retreated quickly, joining the others as they watched in horrified anticipation. Lucas's monstrous form began to twitch and spasm, the antidote working its way through his system. The transformation was slow and agonizing to witness. Gradually, the grotesque features started to recede, the elongated limbs shrinking back to human proportions. As the creature's thrashing subsided, it collapsed onto the floor of the chamber, breathing heavily. The residents held their breath, waiting to see if the antidote had truly worked. Moments later, Lucas's eyes fluttered open, no longer glowing with unnatural light, but filled with confusion and fear. He was human once more, but the trauma of his ordeal was evident. The residents, though relieved, were haunted by the realization of what had been done to him. Lucas was taken to a hospital for treatment, but the memories of the lab and the monster beneath Evergreen Apartments would stay with them forever. The residents vowed to ensure that such a tragedy would never happen again. They destroyed the remaining serum and equipment, sealing the basement and its dark secrets. Though they emerged from the ordeal stronger and more united, the experience left an indelible mark on their souls. They had faced a nightmare and survived, but the memory of the monster beneath would haunt them forever. The relief in Evergreen Apartments was palpable, but it was laced with a profound sense of unease. Lucas, now human again, was taken to the hospital under Tom's watchful eye. The residents, though united in their ordeal, were left grappling with the aftermath of their terrifying discovery. Days passed, and life slowly began to return to a semblance of normalcy. The residents held a meeting in the lobby, this time to discuss the future of the building. Mr. Thompson, visibly shaken by the events, took the floor. "We can't let this happen again," he said, his voice trembling. "We need to seal the basement permanently and ensure no one ever tampers with the remnants of Dr. Leclerc's experiments." The residents agreed, but Jack had a nagging feeling that their ordeal was not entirely over. There were too many unanswered questions, too many loose ends. Determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, he decided to dig deeper into the history of the building and Dr. Leclerc's experiments. Jack spent hours in the local library, poring over old newspapers and records. He discovered that Dr. Victor Leclerc had been a renowned scientist before his fall from grace. His research had initially focused on curing diseases, but his ambition had driven him to explore more dangerous and unethical avenues. The funding for his experiments had come from a shadowy organization with deep pockets and a vested interest in his work. As Jack delved further, he uncovered a series of articles about mysterious disappearances in the area, dating back to the time when Dr. Leclerc had been conducting his experiments. The pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. The missing persons had likely been test subjects, lured by promises of miraculous cures and enhancements. Driven by a sense of justice and a desire to uncover the full truth,
Jack decided to confront Mr. Thompson. He knocked on the door of the manager's office, which was now a mess of paperwork and old furniture, a testament to the building's troubled history. "Mr. Thompson, we need to talk," Jack said firmly. Mr. Thompson looked up from his desk, exhaustion etched on his face. "What is it now, Jack? Haven't we been through enough?" Jack placed the documents he had found on the desk. "I think there's more to this story. Dr. Leclerc's experiments, the funding from that organization, the disappearances. We need to know everything if we're going to move forward."
Mr. Thompson sighed deeply, his shoulders slumping. "I suppose you have a right to know, but it's not a pretty story." He began to recount the history of Evergreen Apartments and Dr. Leclerc's experiments. Mr. Thompson had inherited the building from his father, who had been a business partner of Dr. Leclerc. They had seen the potential in Leclerc's work and had invested heavily in his research. When the experiments began to fail and the side effects became apparent, they had tried to cover it up to protect their investment and reputation. "We thought we could control it," Mr. Thompson admitted, his voice heavy with regret. "We were wrong. Lucas was the last straw. After his transformation, we shut everything down and tried to bury the past. But it seems you can't escape your sins." Jack listened intently, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. "We need to make sure the truth comes out, and we need to ensure that nothing like this ever happens again." Mr. Thompson nodded. "I agree. I'll help you in any way I can." Together, they compiled a comprehensive report detailing Dr. Leclerc's experiments, the funding, and the cover-up. They decided to hand it over to the authorities and the media, hoping that exposing the truth would bring some measure of justice to the victims and prevent future atrocities. As they worked, Jack received a call from Tom. "You need to get to the hospital. Lucas is awake and he's asking for you." Jack hurried to the hospital, his heart pounding. He found Lucas in a private room, looking frail but conscious. Tom stood by his side, a reassuring presence. "Jack," Lucas whispered, his voice weak. "Thank you for saving me." "We're not done yet, Lucas," Jack replied, taking a seat beside him. "We need your help. Do you remember anything from the time you were changed? Anything that might help us understand what happened?" Lucas closed his eyes as if searching his memory. "I remember pain, so much pain, and anger. But there were moments of clarity. I heard voices, commands. They wanted me to be a weapon." Jack's blood ran cold. "A weapon? For who?" "I don't know," Lucas said, shaking his head. "But there were others, more like me, hidden away." The revelation hit Jack like a punch to the gut. There were more victims out there, more people suffering like Lucas had. The organization behind Dr. Leclerc's experiments hadn't stopped. They had simply moved their operations elsewhere. Jack and Tom shared a determined look. "We need to find them," Jack said. "We need to stop this once and for all." The journey to uncover the full extent of the conspiracy had only just begun. The residents of Evergreen Apartments had faced a nightmare and survived, but their fight for justice and truth was far from over. United by their ordeal, they vowed to bring the shadowy organization to light and put an end to the horrors that had begun beneath their home. As they left the hospital, Jack felt a renewed sense of purpose. The monster beneath had been revealed, but the true battle was just beginning. Together they would ensure that the past was never forgotten and that no one else would suffer the same fate.